Hello, good afternoon. Welcome live for the first time here on the channel. Guys, welcome to the UK. It is 2:15 in the afternoon here in the United Kingdom. Welcome along. Hope you are having a good morning in Chicago. I think it's about 8:15 in Illinois this morning. Guys, like I said, it's 2:15 here in the afternoon in the UK. Welcome along, guys. First time we are live and here with you. Look, we're going to talk obviously all things Chicago Bears this afternoon. We're going to talk obviously about the 0-2 start. We're going to talk about the defensive issues the Bears are facing going into the game against the Cowboys, where the Bears will need to have their defense at the very highest level of readiness, where Dennis Allen is going to have to come up with some plans, some strategies for overcoming the difficulties that the Bears are facing at this moment in time. I know what you're all thinking. You're all thinking, geez, man, it's an English guy talking about the Chicago Bears. That's correct. I am English. I was born in England. I was born in the northeast of England, actually. So yeah, look, I am English. Yeah, look, I'm not going to hide that. I've not got an American family. I'm not American. I do support the United States of America. I love the United States of America. Absolutely love the place. But got to say, guys, why the Bears? Well, I've got to say, look, as a guy watching NFL for the first time ever, my first ever experience of the National Football League. My first ever time watching the NFL was actually watching the Super Bowl between the New England Patriots and the Chicago Bears back in the 85-86 season. Obviously, the Super Bowl taking place in 1986, but it was 85 Bears, obviously. That was my first experience of NFL football. And I remember I must have been about 7, 8 at the time. And I remember being allowed to stay up to watch the first quarter. And then my dad would tape, that's right, guys, the old VHS tapes, as you remember, the old VHS tapes. I remember being able to obviously watch the game the next day, but I was allowed to watch the first quarter of the Super Bowl. And I remember seeing obviously the Mike Ditka and seeing the Fridge and Walter Payton, Jim McMahon, Richard Dent, and really, falling in love with these Bears, these big Bears, and obviously that my first experience was the fact that the Bears absolutely smashed the Patriots in that Super Bowl. And look, at that point, when you see the Bears beat the Patriots 46-10 in that game and in New Orleans in the Superdome, you kind of say, yeah, that's my team, man. There must be a good team. That must be a really good team to root for, because they just smashed someone in the final 46-10. As an English person, you see a team in the final and you think, yeah, they're a good team to root for. So, yeah, that was the reason why it started. And, I've kind of gone through it now through it all, haven't you? You've gone through some absolutely dreadful times, and you kind of, I suppose you've got to blame Mike Ditka, you've got to blame Walter Payton, you've got to blame the Fridge for the Bears, and for me falling in love with the Bears and becoming a Bears fan, and obviously experiencing all the downsides that have come with it. It's not been great, has it, the last few years? Obviously, the last Super Bowl that we had with Lovie Smith as the head coach, losing to Indianapolis, unfortunately. That wasn't great. I remember actually staying up and watching all of that game. I've been because obviously I was a hell of a lot older, and at that point you can decide what you do when you want to do it. That was that was a long time ago. That Super Bowl, wasn't it? Way back when was that Super Bowl? That was, just remember back, it was 2007. So that was 18 years ago. So I would have been nearly 29, 30 at that point. So yeah, I remember watching that. I remember seeing us going down 29-17 to Tony Dungy's Colts. Yeah, it was a gutting experience, that game again. So look, the times, it's been lean times. It's been lean times being a Bears fan. But hey, look, you get through it. You keep following your team, and you hope for good times to come. And I think we all kind of sat here in the off season, didn't we? And go back across the channel's videos and have a look. And we all kind of had this desire that we thought that things were changing. Things were changing. We brought in obviously Dennis Allen as our DC. We brought in Ben Johnson as our head coach. And we made changes. And we kind of hoped, I think, that things would change, that the Bears would be better. The Bears would win games, But, hey, it hasn't started well, has it? It's 0-2. It's not the start you wanted. It's not in your dream the start that you hoped for. I've got to say, my projection was 1-1. I projected 1-1 coming out of this week 2. I thought, honestly, we'd come out of week 2, we'd be 1-1. I thought we'd beat the Vikings on Monday night in the opener, and then I thought we would lose to the Lions because it was in Detroit. Just to go and run over that record prediction, I then predicted that we'd beat the Cowboys. I'm not as confident now. We'd beat the Raiders. Again, not as confident now. And we'd go into the bye at 4-1, but 3-1. Sorry, 3-1. But I don't think that happens now. I really don't. I've not got massive high hopes that we go into the bye at 3-1. But look, it is what it is, guys. It is what it is, and we are where we are at this point in time, and it's not great, is it? It's not great. It hasn't been a great start to the season. Caleb's underperformed. I think the offensive line is not what we hoped it would be. I think we all hoped that the O-line would be a lot better than it's actually been. I think there's been weaknesses on that, and I want to talk about that in this video and in this podcast. I want to talk about that. And look, guys, if you do get anybody tuning in from wherever you are in the United States of America, please let me know where you're watching from. Give me your news, give me your views, give me your opinions on the Bears and on how you think the season has gone so far. We've also got a poll running in the live chat, guys. Who should start at left tackle? Braxton Jones, Theo Benedette, or Ozzy Trapillo? Who would you have starting at left tackle? Let me know in the comments your views on that one. Who is your starter come Sunday against the Bears? I've got to say, as it stands at the moment, 67% of you saying Theo Benedette, 33% of you saying Ozzy Trapillo. Nobody voting for Braxton Jones, and I can't say as I am surprised at this moment in time. Right, look, let's talk a bit of this 0-2 start. Let's talk a bit of the defense. The defense has pretty much stank the joint out, and I don't think we can kind of look at any area of that defense at this moment in time and say, yeah, well done, guys. You're doing a good job for the Bears this season. You're doing a really good job. You're excelling. I don't think there's any area, and I think if you'd come to me at the start of the season and said, come week 3, we'd be sitting here and the biggest worry would actually not be the offense, which I don't still think is perfect. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the offense is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But what I am saying is that we are in a position where the defense is now the biggest worry for me going forward. The defense is the biggest concern. Now, if you look at the last 5, take out, the fact that obviously we are massively conceding a huge average number of points because, that's kind of skewed, isn't it, by that 50 odd points that the Lions put on us. But if you take the last 5 quarters of Chicago Bears football, in the last 5 quarters of Chicago Bears football, we have conceded 73 points in the last 5 quarters. 73 points in 5 quarters of football. Add into that the fact that we have been gashed for over 670 yards in that last 5 quarters of football. That is pretty shocking. That is pretty damning that we are being absolutely gashed for over 600 yards and 70 points in 5 quarters of football. And you look at where the weaknesses are, you look at where the issues are, and there are a lot of issues on that defensive side of the ball. Now, does Dennis Allen carry some of the blame? Yeah, as the DC, he's got to come up with schemes, plans to obviously work his way around the issues that we are facing. And the current injury report, as it stands, does not look good. You look at the injury report coming in to that game against the Cowboys, and there is a lot. This is yesterday's injury report, but there are a lot of players out, a lot of players missing from this lineup. You've got a situation where we're going to be without Grady, could be without Grady Jarrett, Jalen Johnson, Jalen Jones, DeMarco Jackson. Some of those guys aren't starters, but you TJ Edwards, Gordon, Jarrett, Johnson are all starters. They're all guys who would be starting in this team if they were fully fit, and that is a massive, massive, huge miss. Now, the problem we've got here, I think, is that you look first of all at that defensive line. And, you know, when your secondary is in a banged up position, when your secondary is struggling, as we are at this moment in time, and we are really badly struggling at this point in time, you know, in terms of that secondary unit, because of the fact that JJ is out, because of the fact that Kyler Gordon is out, you know, we are relying on pretty much Tyreek Stevenson to be our CB1, and that's a whole set of issues. We're relying on Nick McLeod. We're relying on Blackwell. We're relying on Nashawn Wright. You know, you're relying on guys who probably wouldn't be starting, you know, if everyone was fit and available. You know, if we had Jalen Johnson, if we had Kyler Gordon, you know, we wouldn't be leaning on Tyreek Stevenson as much. We wouldn't be obviously depending on Nashawn Wright to step up. You know, JJ would be covering CD Lamb this weekend, and there wouldn't be concerns over CD Lamb because Jalen Johnson would absolutely have him in his pocket. Now, going into this weekend, we are concerned. Now, one of the things that when your secondary is really beat up, you need to look to is the production of your edge rushers, production of your defensive line. And the D-line and the edge rushers are simply not producing, are not putting the passer under any sort of pressure. Now, we can talk about what that means for this weekend in a moment, but you go to, say, Detroit. Now, look, Jared Goff, I'm not saying Jared Goff is trash. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Jared Goff is trash. I'm going to say, you know, Goff is a decent quarterback, but he is a guy who will stand in the pocket and he will kill you from the pocket. He's not a guy who's going to use his legs. He's not a guy who's going to run with the ball. He's not a guy who's going to hurt you the way that a Lamar Jackson or a Patrick Mahomes would, or the way that a Josh Allen would. That's not how he hurts you. To get to Jared Goff, you've got a static target. You've got to get after him. You've got to put him under pressure. And especially, you know, when you've got a situation where your secondary is suffering, when Tyreek Stevenson looks like he's going to get burned every chance that the opposition get to go at him, when Nashawn Wright is about as much use as an asthmatic donkey with 3 legs, you know, you've got a situation where you've got to rely on Montez Sweat, Diode Ingbo, Grady Jarrett, Gervon Dexter to get after the passer, to put the passer under pressure, to not give him time to go through his reads, to not give him time to go through his progressions, to not give him time to sit there in the pocket and pick his receivers out. Now, the issue we've got is at the moment, Montez Sweat, Diode Ingbo are not getting to the quarterback. They're not finishing their moves. They're not finishing their plays. And once again, we're giving the likes of Jared Goff, JJ McCarthy, as we did in the fourth quarter against the Vikings. We're giving the opposition quarterback all the time in the world to absolutely pick our secondary apart. And the issue you've got there is obviously when you haven't got a good quality secondary that can help you, that can be in effect that no-fly zone that you want, you're going to get absolutely slaughtered. The D-line also isn't great at stopping the run. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery were very impactful against us for the Lions. You know, they really did some severe damage against us. I mean, if you look at the output of both Montgomery and Gibbs in that game at Ford Field, they did damage and they got the running game going, which is, you know, as we know, is absolutely vital for any team. You know, total rushing yards, they rushed for 177 yards on us. You look at the rushing stats, Jahmyr Gibbs, 94 yards, David Montgomery, 57 yards, Khalif Raymond, 9, and Rawson Brown, 7. So the production was there. And that causes issues. That causes problems. And you need that pressure on the quarterback. You need that pressure on your opposition's QB. Because without that pressure, you've got a situation where, of course, you give him time to pick you apart. And that's what's happening. You know, what we need going into this weekend is the D-line, whoever starts on the D-line, be that Gervon Dexter, be that Shamar Turner coming in, be that Andrew Billings, whoever, to really put pressure on the line to stop the run. And also then we need Montez Sweat, we need Diode Ingbo to get into the backfield and cause some havoc, to cause some chaos, to not give Dak Prescott the opportunity to sit there to move, to pass the ball. Now, Dak is very good at dealing with the blitz. Dak does roll. I mean, Dak is a choker, don't get me wrong. As soon as the playoffs come around, we all know that Dak is like... But, you know, regular season Dak, under pressure, guys that, you know, blitz comes, he rolls out, he makes time, you know, he is going to be good. But what the problem is at the moment, that even when you've got that, if you've got Sweat and Odeyingbo not producing, not finishing their moves, not getting to the passer, it produces a real issue. It produces a real problem, and we need protection for that secondary, or else we're going to get absolutely torn apart. Now, the problem we've got, of course, going into this weekend is that with obviously Grady Jarrett is out, possibly. We've got that secondary still in the state that it's in. The other problem, of course, is the linebacker room, obviously. Now, TJ Edwards, I think, is unlikely to start. Tremaine Edmonds is just absolute toilet at the moment. Noah Sewell's doing a pretty good job, as long as he doesn't get caught in coverage. But there needs to be a step up from the defense. I don't know what Dennis Allen needs to do. But Dennis Allen needs to come with some clever schemes, come with some changes to that defensive scheme to kind of try and overcome these difficulties, these problems that the Bears are having. Because if he doesn't, then you know full well that Dak is going to sit in that pocket and he is going to absolutely pick us apart. And that cannot happen. You know, do you realistically want a situation where you've got, you know, Dak Prescott sitting there having all the time in the world to pass the ball to CeeDee Lamb, to pass the ball to George Pickens? Because I am not super confident that our secondary can cope with and can stay and can block, and stop CeeDee Lamb, stop George Pickens. That ain't going to happen, guys. That ain't going to happen. And we need something to happen with regards to that. We need some sort of pressure. Now, look, it's probably too late for someone to come in at this point. But, you know, looking longer term, you know, JJ is going to be out for the season. Tyreek Stevenson is not looking like a proper player. He really isn't. He is looking pretty dreadful. Teams are targeting him. Teams are pulling him apart. You know, so for me, you need, I think Ryan Poles needs to go out there and find someone to come in and, you know, replace JJ, to come in and give us another option, to come and give us something. Now, who's out there, you know, who is around that we could get? You know, there are options, obviously the likes of James Bradbury, Stephen Gilmore, you know, there's people like that around. You know, we really do need some sort of solution to these issues. You know, do you really want to be going through the rest of the season with Tyreek Stevenson as our CB1? You know, for me, you know, Tyreek Stevenson is not a CB1. He really genuinely isn't. The guy is not even a CB2. I'd say in most other teams, you'd have a situation where Tyreek Stevenson would be your first change, be the first guy to come off the bench. You'd have two proper starting cornerbacks, and I think that's a position we should have addressed, and we didn't address properly in the draft. Zar Frazier, but Zar Frazier's out, and I don't think he, you know, is in the short term was ever the answer to that question. So the defensive side of the ball is really, really concerning me. Now, I don't think they'll move for pass rush on the defensive line if Grady Jarrett is out or any sort of thing, because I think the hope is that Austin Booker comes back, and Austin Booker, who was excellent during preseason, can fill that gap. That has got to be the hope. That has got to be the desire, I think, of Ryan Poles, Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen. But, you know, realistically, that secondary is not looking good. I mean, even Kevin Byard, the veteran Byard, looked poor in that game against Detroit. You know, it's a worry, and obviously the concern around Jaquan Brisker as well. Brisker obviously is injury prone. He's a guy who can get injured or get concussions at the drop of a hat. So for me, there's something needs to be done as regards the secondary to address these issues we currently have as Bears. And like I said, you know, you look at that injury report. Even Jalen Jones, who we brought back off waivers, you know, has been absolutely dreadful, has been injured, and he's out. You know, where is that talent? You know, where is that talent? It's just simply not there. You know, he's simply not there. I don't know, guys. I really don't know what the situation is with this one at this moment in time. But something needs to be done desperately about this, I think. You know, in terms of this cornerback room and how this cornerback room looks at this present moment in time, because it is not up to snuff. And with the fact that Dayo Adeyingbo and Montez Sweat are struggling to get to quarterback, struggling to put the QB under any pressure, it is something that needs to be addressed. It really does, because it is a massive, massive concern for me. Huge, huge concern. I mean, Jalen being out is huge. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. If we had Jalen, it would be different, because Jalen Johnson is, you know, probably the best cornerback in the NFC. He really is one of the top cornerbacks in the league, and him being there makes a massive, massive amount of difference. Of course it does, but what do we do? That is the big question. And the answer for me is that you've got to go out there and you've got to put into place a strategy. You've got to go and get someone who can fill that gap, who can stop this secondary getting picked apart. Or Dennis Allen has got to do something in terms of sorting this defensive line out, finding a way to blitz, finding a way to get after the passer to stop them from standing there and picking this team apart. Because, guys, it does not work as it is at this moment in time. It is a worry. The defense is a major worry. And like I said to you at the start, if you'd said to me after only 2 games or at the start of the season that the issue would be not the offense, and like I said, I'm not saying the offense is perfect. I'm not saying that for a minute. But what I am saying is that the defense is becoming a big issue. And that for me is a major, major league worry. And it has to be addressed. It's got to be addressed by Ryan Poles, or we are going to struggle for the rest of the season, really big time. And I don't know about you guys, but I do not want another season of a losing record, another season of failure. And if there is another season of failure, if there's another season where it's a losing record yet again, then big questions need to be asked of Ryan Poles. Big, big questions need to be asked of Ryan Poles. Yeah. I don't know what to do, guys. I don't know what to do. Right, look, let's move it along a little bit. Let's talk a little bit of offense. I just want to address something. The other day I put out a video on the channel, which was called On the Brink of Benching, which was about Caleb Williams. And I gotta say, some of the negative impact that we had, comments we had from that video, some of the negative points that were made in that video, I think, honestly, some people didn't bother actually watching the video. They actually just read the title and went solely off the title. And they went solely off the title of the heading. They didn't actually bother watching the video. We had this comment here from J2 Dizilak 750. He said, Caleb's stats are better than CJ Stroud. You people are insane. Uni Cowboy Slots said, that's what I've been saying. CJ looked terrible. Caleb played okay with room to be better. Right. That's one of the comments there. There was another comment here. I wouldn't be surprised if this was from Chad Wickerman. I wouldn't be surprised if Bajan's dad, who's spreading those rumours online about Caleb being benched for Tyson, he was doing it last year too. It would be a ridiculous move to bench Caleb after a few games into Ben's new scheme. A lot of people just hate him because he wears fingernail polish in honour of his mum. Right. Look, I want to just address something from that video, right? From watching that video and from that video. At no point in that video did I say that Caleb Williams should be benched. At no point have I ever said that Caleb Williams should be benched. I am pro Caleb. I think the Bears' only hope this season of being successful, of winning, is with Caleb Williams. We are not going to win and get to the playoffs with Tyson Bagent as our QB1. Okay, the guy is a very solid backup quarterback. That's what Tyson Bagent is. He's a backup. He's not a starter. He's a backup. Okay, I'd be more confident if we had to bench Caleb of actually having Case Keenum as QB1. At least the guy has starting experience in the NFL and playoff experience in the NFL. But I've never once advocated for Caleb Williams to be benched. In fact, if you go and watch actually some of the other podcasts that I watch, I will argue it out with the Bagent baddies all the time. Caleb needs time. He needs time. Caleb, yes, was a number one pick. Yes, he was a Heisman Trophy winner, right? And I understand all that. And I understand where people are coming from. But as I've said on numerous occasions, you can be super talented. You can be the best QB in the world coming out of college. But the standard, the difference between college ball and NFL ball is so much different. The level is just a different planet. Add into that the fact that Caleb was absolutely sold a turkey last season. He had one of the worst head coaches in the NFL. As has been said on another podcast, I love Chicago Bears Central. Hayes was talking about it today. He was saying that, look, you never should have had a situation where Matt Eberflus was allowed to influence Caleb Williams. That should never have been allowed to happen. You also had to work under one of the worst offensive coordinators in NFL history in Shane Waldron. He wasn't coached and developed last season. So, he's coming into a season effectively restarting everything, starting all over again. The guy's effectively a rookie again. He's effectively, rookie 2.0. And Ben Johnson obviously is ripping up Johnson is clearly ripping up everything from last season and starting all over again and putting in a completely new system. And it's going to take time for him to learn the playbooks, learn the system. I mean, you've got to look at the success we are having, and there is some success there, guys. Let's face facts. There is some success there. You know, at the end of the day, you look at it, and the success is this. The success number one is that the scripted plays at the start of the game are going well. On the whole, we're moving the ball, we're doing well, we've scored first drive touchdown, we've played well. The development between Odunze and Williams is very good indeed. Rem Odunze is outplaying DJ Moore. Rem Odunze is by far our most effective wide receiver. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, that there are positives coming out of this. There are real positives there. Yes, there are negatives. There are things that still need to be developed. You know, sometimes he's not seeing targets as quickly as he is. Sometimes he is missing easy targets. He's throwing passes at wide receivers' feet or tight ends' feet. But that's all things that need to come. And I think, you know, what Ben Johnson said the other day in terms of we're going to move this on a stage now. We're going to develop this a little bit of a stage further. You know, we're going to get the tight ends more involved. We're going to get Luther Burden more involved. You know, we're going to see more of Rem Odunze. You know, these are good things. And hopefully, you know, that Caleb Williams, who is progressing, he is moving forward. Ben Johnson himself said that. Now, I said that the other day, and someone said, well, what else is he going to say? Well, he's just not going to mention it. He ain't going to mention it. He's going to find ways of skirting around it. That's what they do. These guys are media trained. They know how to do it. So he is progressing. But it's the speed of that progression that is obviously the concern. And for me, he is making progress, but it is slow progress. And he will get there. But, you know, there's no way that Caleb Williams gets benched. It's not happening. It ain't going to happen. So Bajan Baddies, forget it. Your boy ain't starting. Your boy ain't starting anytime soon. The only way your boy starts is if he goes somewhere else. And that ain't going to happen anytime soon either. Now, one of the issues that we have looked at, I think, on the offensive side of the ball is our running game ain't shit. Our running game is genuinely poor. You know, running back one, D'Andre Swift. D'Andre Swift is just absolute garbage. The guy is just a joke. You know, he really isn't producing at all. I mean, what have we got? 1.89 yards before contact, and then nothing after. You know, Swift, to me, makes far too many mistakes. He's not prepared to go for the hard yards. He always wants to bounce it outside for the home run ball, which he can't do. You know, I would love to see us come up with some sort of solution in terms of that running game. And we have to develop that running game. Now, realistically, we should have gone and got ourselves a running back. Now, I suppose we could still go and get a veteran before trade deadline or find someone who's, you know, not under contract. That is obviously an option because D'Andre Swift isn't an option. I would love to see a Kyle Monungai get more touches of the ball. I think Kyle is prepared to take those hard yards. He's prepared to run the ball. You can't set up a play-action game if the opposition know you can't run the ball. It ain't going to happen. You can pretend to run the ball all you want, but the opposition is going to go, yeah, you ain't going to run the ball because you're shit at it. Now, Kyle Monungai, for me, has to have more touches of the ball. He has to have more involvement. I think he has to have more involvement than D'Andre Swift. You know, D'Andre Swift been limited this week. Hopefully that means that maybe Kyle does get more of a look in going into Sunday's game against the Cowboys. Hey, I don't know. But, you know, it could be something that we look at. But the O-line has become a concern. You know, we've invested a lot of money. I think we've got the fourth highest paid O-line in the NFL. Drew Dolman's been average. Jonah Jackson's been okay, not brilliant. Joe Tooney's been good. Darnell Wright has looked awful. And Braxton Jones has looked dreadful. I honestly don't know how Braxton Jones continues to get a game for the Bears. How he continues to not get benched. You know, Braxton Jones is just genuinely a very, very bad football player. Yes, I know he's come back from that injury, of course, but you look at the way things have gone so far with him as our left tackle. Bearing in mind he is protecting Caleb's blind side. And you see a whole host of issues there. You see a whole host of problems when it comes to Braxton Jones. And let me just run you through these stats that I put on a community post the other day. Braxton Jones was responsible for 77.8% of the pressures allowed by the offensive line versus the Detroit Lions. So Braxton Jones was responsible for over 3/4 of the pressures allowed via the Lions. Just let that take that in from it. One man out of 5 was responsible for over 3/4 of the pressures put on him. In fact, Braxton Jones has allowed 13 pressures and 2 sacks in 2 games. You can put 13 QB pressures and 2 sacks all on Braxton after 2 games. More than the rest of the O-line combined. Man, the guy sucks. The guy is poor. He needs to be benched. He needs to ride the bench for the rest of the season, in my opinion. We don't need to see Braxton Jones again. We don't need to see him play again this season. We need to look at it and we need to, in my opinion, we need to start someone else. Now, whether that's Ozzy Trapillo, whether that's Theo Benedette, I don't know. Now, Theo Benedette did have 15 snaps via the Lions. In those 15 snaps, Theo Benedette allowed 0 hurries, 0 sacks, had 0 penalties, and an 81.2 pass blocking grade. Now, Ben Johnson has talked about competition for places. He's talked about driving up standards. Maybe Theo Benedette is the best possible man to start at left tackle for now on Sunday if they're not willing to go with Ozzy Trapillo, which to me is a bit crazy considering you spent the 2nd round pick on Ozzy Trapillo. You know, you spent that pick on Trapillo. Or was it a 3rd? I can't remember now. You know, you spent that pick on Trapillo. Why are you not using him? You know, why? And, you know, we can debate all we want, you know, about the effectiveness of Ryan Poles' picks. Of course we can. You know, of course we can debate that all you want. You know, the fact that the 4 top picks in the draft had very little involvement at all in that game on Sunday. Yes, he was a 2nd round pick, Ozzy Trapillo. You know, and again, you know, you're picking a 2nd round guy. He should be at least competing for a starting, not, you know, a healthy scratch. You know, again, poor from Poles, poor from the Bears. You know, and to me, Braxton Jones is part of the problem on that offensive line. And, you know, the running game, yes, we have the wrong people in that running back room, say, with DeAndre Swift. And like I said, I think the solution is to put Kyle Monangai. I think give Kyle Monangai more touches of the ball, perhaps involve Roshan Johnson a little bit more too, and give less DeAndre Swift. But get someone on the left side who's going to actually help, who's going to actually shore up one side of the, you know, if you had Tooney and Benedette or Tooney and Trapillo actually shoring up that left-hand side, you know, yes, we've still got issues with Jonah Jackson and Ozzy and Darnell Wright on the right side, but, you know, at least shore up one side of that offensive line, give them a side to run to, a side that's going to block well, a side that's going to open holes for the running backs, give them something to work to. So for me, I would definitely be going with Benedette or Trapillo on Sunday against the Cowboys. I certainly wouldn't be sticking with Braxton Jones. The guy needs to be benched. He does need to be benched ASAP. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys. Obviously, if you are watching later, if you've caught the podcast later, please obviously smash that like, comment and share on the video. Look, I mean, one of the things I've always said as a podcast host is that I always like to try and turn these things into a bit of a conversation between me and you, you know, not just me sitting here talking for 35 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever. You know, I like it to be a two-way conversation. I like it to be a situation where you contribute as well and we have a bit of a chat about what's happening. We have a bit of a chat about the team and how we feel and all that. And that's the way I like to do things. You know, that's the way I like to work. And it works more effectively that way, I think. So obviously, guys, if you are finding this podcast late, look out for more of our pods upcoming, obviously, over the next few days at different times throughout the day. And come and join in. Come and join in the conversation. Get involved. You know, get involved, give your opinions on the Bears, and let's hope that we can turn this around, because this at the moment ain't looking clever, is it? It ain't looking clever. Well, guys, that's it for this afternoon. I've got things to do here. We are 10 to 3 in the UK now. Guys, go and pick the kids up from school. Thank you for watching the Bears Huddle Podcast, our first live. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. And look, as always, guys, on the way out, please remember, bear down. Let's keep the faith. We'll get there. Thanks for watching.